Jessica saw you at the restaurant bar, planning a trip with another woman. Oh, I see. So what? Even when caught cheating, my husband Brian wouldn't drop his defiant attitude. In that moment, everything we had built over 17 years fell apart. In this day and age, I was a full-time homemaker, and we were living with his parents. Just like every other year, I had given up the job I loved at a publishing company where I felt fulfilled. Now, I spent half of the week taking my parents to the hospital and adjusting meals according to everyone's schedule. I was living a life much like a housemaid after getting married. I had no time for myself. The only place I could relax was in our bedroom, even in this spacious house. Despite all this, I had chosen this life because I wanted to be with my husband. The option of leaving never crossed my mind. So when my unfaithful husband said, "We can get a divorce," I was at a loss for words, feeling more amazed than angry. This is the story of me, Nicole Ritchie, turning 45 this year, leaving my husband Brian, with whom I lived for 17 years, and starting my life from scratch. It all started 3 months ago on the 23rd. That day was payday for him, who worked at an electronics manufacturer. Usually, his salary would be deposited into our joint account. I would use that money to pay our monthly bills and give him an allowance in the evening. However, 3 months ago, his salary wasn't deposited into our joint account. I thought there must have been some technical glitch, so when he got home in the evening, I asked him about it. "What do you mean you changed the deposit account without saying anything to me?" He had switched the account to his personal one. "But what about our payments? These bills are due on the 25th. I couldn't keep up with the sudden change and just thought of the immediate concern. Without thinking, he said, "Just let me know how much you need, and I'll transfer that amount into the joint account." He said this while taking off his suit with his back turned to me. He wouldn't even look me in the eyes. "So why did you change it?" I couldn't think of any reason for this. In the 17 years we'd been together, we had never changed the account. We were saving in our joint account, so it wouldn't be a problem if his transfer was late. It's not like our bills would fall behind. Maybe I didn't need to press the issue, but I couldn't help wondering. Why didn't he trust me with our finances? Did I do something wrong? I didn't remember overspending, but I thought maybe I had unknowingly upset him. If so, I needed to apologize. That's what I thought when I asked him, but he seemed to think I was blaming him. He threw his freshly removed shirt onto the couch and glared at me. "It's my hard-earned money, isn't it?" "Yes, it is. But why do I need your permission to use it?" I couldn't understand his words. I'd been giving him a $800 allowance every month, but that was just a temporary arrangement. If his expenses piled up, I would give him more. I asked him what he spent his money on, but I never refused to give him more when he needed it. As a stay-at-home wife, there were times when I asked if I could buy something I wanted, but the reverse never happened. "I don't need dinner today." "But I already prepared it." "Never mind, I'll eat out." He got bent out of shape, grabbed his car keys, and went out again. He had seemed strange for the past 17 years, but we never had issues over money. Suddenly, he starts saying it's his money. While cleaning up the food I had prepared, I was upset at my husband's selfish actions. I was frustrated that, despite having food at home, he chose to eat out anyway. Now he was in charge of the finances. From that moment, he began eating out every night and coming home late at night after I fell asleep. Also, the number of days he told me he was staying at work overnight increased. The fight had completely escalated. Even when we were together, we didn't talk more than necessary. As time passed, it was hard to find a chance to make up, and I started blaming myself. We'd never had a fight last this long before. It was a minor issue that he changed the bank account without consulting me. If he wants to manage the finances, that's fine. After about 3 weeks of awkwardness, I began to reconsider things. Then one day, I received a message from Jessica, who is my colleague. When I worked as a publisher, my colleague Jessica reached out to me. "Hey, how are you doing? How about lunch soon?" We used to go out for drinks after work and spend our days off together when we were single. Now, we both have families, so we don't contact each other as much, but we try to meet at least once or twice a year. Her invitation came at a good time, so I agreed readily. 3 days later in the afternoon, she and I were sitting in a cafe in the next town. So they moved into the care facility, huh? Yeah, both of them in the same place, I replied. She asked how things were going, and I told her about my parents-in-law moving into a nursing home a few months ago. I know I shouldn't say this, but it's a good thing. It must be a relief for you, she said, looking pleased. She had been worried about me because I never had time for myself, so it seemed she was relieved now. Well, I do have to get their clothes, visit, and accompany them to their doctor's appointments, but still my life has become a lot easier. This was the first time since I was single that I was able to casually make time to meet with a friend. You're such a dutiful daughter-in-law. Is Brian still hands-off? Yes, he seems to want to do nothing on his days off. He never wanted to go anywhere on his days off. In these 17 years, we've never even gone shopping together. Her husband is diligent. He picks her up in his car when it rains and sometimes even does the shopping for her. He never changed at all. Well, since I am a stay-at-home wife, at least he could take care of his own parents. She has never thought highly of my husband. We both had jobs when we got married, but he never helped with the household chores. There were days when I was too tired to do housework. He found it unbelievable and suggested I become a stay-at-home wife. I didn't want to quit, but I resigned as he suggested and became a full-time homemaker. Soon, I was asked to live with his parents, and I ended up taking care of them. The reason I couldn't talk back to my husband was because of the significant difference in our incomes. He is 7 years older than me. By that time, he already held a position at his company, and his income was more than double mine. Can you earn as much as I do? If you can, I wouldn't mind quitting, he'd say, making me speechless. I discussed my true desires of not wanting to quit my job with her. I even cried on the phone, overwhelmed by having no time for myself. I understand if she holds a negative view of him because of my venting. After a while, the warm vegetable salad we ordered arrived. As she served it on smaller plates, she asked again, "So, how are things with him?" I thought for a while and nodded affirmatively. I'd actually come to discuss our big fight, but I didn't want him to be seen in a worse light. Jessica paused, holding the serving tongs and staring at me, who only managed to nod in response. Trying to keep my smile to not arouse suspicion, she stopped serving the salad midway. "I'm sorry, I asked it the wrong way. Nickel, things aren't going well with him, are they?" she said, as if she knew something. I was left flustered and unable to respond. She started talking about something that had happened a few days ago. That day, she was at a dining bar near her office for a work after party. When she went to use the restroom, she passed a man in the aisle who turned out to be my husband. He didn't seem to recognize her, so she decided against calling out to him. But noticing that he was in casual clothes made her wonder if he was with me. After leaving the restroom, she decided to take a look at where he was seated. She saw him having drinks with a woman who wasn't me. "Then I realized instantly he's cheating on you," she said. They were sitting close together, bodies touching as they drank. Was that really my husband? I couldn't believe it. That day, he hadn't come home due to working overtime, so there was no reason for him to be in casual clothes. Moreover, he seemed genuinely busy lately. Does he even have the time for cheating in his current state? Although we've been on bad terms recently, I can't imagine him resorting to cheating. I just don't see him as that kind of person. Sensing my thoughts, she sighed and added, "For the upcoming long weekend, he mentioned going to a place in Laguna Beach. He was showing information about the accommodations on his phone and mentioned something about a prime-grade steak dinner. You could probably find the hotel if you search from there." She started searching for the hotel on her phone. While at the cafe, I was still hoping that it was just her misunderstanding. However, as soon as I got home, I started looking through his clothes. I don't remember exactly how many clothes he has, so I wouldn't know what was missing. But I did notice that 3 or 4 of his favorite shirts were gone. Until last year, he would immediately wear them after washing, and they were always at the front of the drawer. Now, they were nowhere to be found, even after searching every corner, the back of the closet, and the drawers of rarely used cabinets. Literally everywhere. The only thing that came to mind was him working overtime, and even on weekends, due to his busy schedule. I remembered the look on his face when he told me he had spent a night in the company's restroom because he missed the last train. As I stood in front of the closet, I heard the sound of an incoming email from my pocket. It was a message from Jessica. The email included the URL of a hotel in Laguna Beach. As I stood there in a daze, I slowly pressed the link, and a stay plan with a dinner, including prime-grade meat, was displayed. I felt dizzy, like I was having a bad dream. There was a part of me that still wanted to believe in him, but I couldn't find his favorite shirt. That was a huge blow. 3 days later, on the Saturday before a long weekend, he was unusually at home, working with the TV on. I placed a cup of coffee near his computer and casually asked, I haven't seen you wearing your favorite t-shirt this year. Even though he hadn't taken his eyes off the display, when I put down his drink, the sound of him typing on the keyboard suddenly stopped at my question. Then he said, "Yeah, I'll wear it sometime," making a point of looking at me as he responded. That was unusual. For the past month since that payday, he had been distant, but now, when asked about his shirt, he was making eye contact. "I looked for it, but I couldn't find it," I added. He replied, "Isn't it somewhere?" and then looked away, returning to his computer. Seeing his reaction, I couldn't help but feel suspicious. Despite saying his favorite shirt was missing, he showed no signs of being troubled. Normally, in this kind of situation, he would pretend to be upset just to make a point that I hadn't taken care of it properly, even if he really didn't need it. Last year, he kept complaining just because it hadn't dried due to the rain. Every bit of change made everything seem suspicious. When it comes to this, I can't control myself. I need clear answers, often pushing too far. "You're off for a long weekend, right?" Even though we hadn't made up after our last fight, I couldn't help but ask something more intrusive. "Work from when?" "I don't know. There's a business trip. I might have a day off." Was this also a lie? I could only think it was. For the past 17 years, he always took time off during the holidays. Jessica's words about going to Laguna Beach and the prime-grade steak crossed my mind. The story I heard at the cafe started to feel real, and I felt a surge of anger. Before I realized it, I said, "Business trip? You mean you're going to Laguna Beach?" He froze while staring at the screen. Slowly turning around, his expression changed. With a weary face, he squinted and glared at me, just like during our fight on payday. What the hell is going on? Rummaging around our room, pretending to look for clothes, he sighed heavily. Hearing his words, my lips quivered. I had rummaged through the room, but found nothing. I couldn't find the t-shirt. Yet he said I had rummaged, which means if I had looked more, I might have found something linked to Laguna Beach. I still wanted to believe, even while doubting. "Jessica said she saw you at the wine bar. You and another woman were planning a trip." The things we had built started to crumble. "Oh, is that so?" I thought he would make an excuse, but reality was different. He wasn't flustered at all. He turned away with a defiant look. "So, what's the point?" he questioned. What did he want to hear? When I became speechless out of disbelief, he piled on words. "Who do you think you are? I'm working hard to earn money so a stay-at-home wife can live comfortably." He yelled loudly, and my head started to ache. I placed a hand on my forehead and took a deep breath. "I'm okay with getting a divorce, he uttered. For the past 17 years, no matter what happened, no matter how hard it was, I had tried not to think about it. I was disappointed that he could say it without hesitation. From that day, he continued to ignore me. Even worse, once he knew I found out, he started making plans with her right in front of me, like, "All right, I'll pick you up at 7 in the morning." The first time it happened, I was dumbfounded. Was he always like this? The person in front of me felt like a total stranger. Then the long weekend arrived, and on the day of his trip, I was in the car driven by Jessica, silently watching him cheat. "Nicole, did you get a shot of him putting his arm around her waist just now?" "Yeah, I did." "You should take as many photos as you can, okay?" When I told her about my conversation with him on Saturday, she was furious and said I should break up with such a man. She also suggested that I take photos as proof of his cheating and claim for emotional damages. She spent her much-anticipated weekend for this very purpose. The woman he was cheating with looked to be in her late 25s or early 30s, slim and wearing revealing clothes. He kept stroking her long hair with a gentle smile on his face. Since he left the house, I also left promptly and watched everything. I saw him pick her up from her apartment, stop by a convenience store to buy breakfast together, and walk arm in arm in front of the splash zone and penguins. Now, they had just entered a hotel together. I took pictures of all of it with my phone, but each time I pressed the shutter, I pondered over what I was doing. I knew it, but seeing it with my own eyes made me really sad. Yet, I didn't shed a tear. I just stared at his joyful face. "What do we do now? Shall we stay somewhere for the night?" Jessica asked. "No, let's head back," I replied. She seemed to plan to stay overnight, but I shook my head. I didn't want to waste money I had saved by scrimping on such a thing. I thought our life as a couple had finally started after my in-laws were placed in a nursing home. We hadn't been able to go on trips until now because we always took care of our parents first. But from now on, we wanted to create memories as a couple. The money I had planned to use for those times seemed wasted. I wondered if I had just wasted 17 years. If I knew it would turn out like this, I wouldn't have married him. If I knew I would go through this, I would have divorced him a long time ago. I shouldn't have had to endure and try so hard. Seeing his smile today for the first time in a while made me want to redo those 17 years. Though I wanted to cry, I couldn't and just kept sighing. Jessica had been quietly listening, but suddenly started the car engine and checked the time. "What time is it now?" "After 4 o'clock, I replied. Then she called someone and smiled at me. "Hey, Nicole, let's move out right now." "Huh?" "Ah, hello. Sorry to bother you during the long weekend. I appreciate your help." I was taken aback by her sudden proposal. She was about to start something, and I shook my head at her while she was on the phone, but she ignored me and went on saying it's all good. From that moment, Jessica was very energetic. While driving, she called various places on her car's navigation system and gathered people to come to my house. About 5 hours later, we got home in the evening. In just 2 hours, all my belongings in the house were packed into cardboard boxes. It was literally unbelievable. "I didn't want to talk about work since you didn't want to quit, Nicole, but I've transferred from a fashion magazine and now am the editor-in-chief of a local magazine." In the car, she made various calls to the moving company, a real estate agency, and also to a lawyer who knows Brian. She had expertly adjusted the schedule so that the service people's visiting times did not clash. I moved according to her instructions. Minute by minute, I packed only my valuables into a box, and the rest were done by the movers. The real estate agent introduced me to a house that could be moved into within a few days. For the time being, my belongings were sent to her house, and I ended up staying with her for a few days. After the truck packed with my things left, a lawyer visited me. They gave me advice about things like claiming alimony after divorce, guiding me towards a method that would be the least burdensome. I was amazed at how much could be done in just a few hours. I knew she was a very active person from when we used to work together, but her ability struck me as incredible. However, looking around the room that was now half empty, anxiety slowly began to creep in. He's definitely going to be mad. The cost of moving was surprisingly low. The studio apartment was affordable, and even the consultation with the lawyer was free. Yet, it was still costing money. I made these moves without telling him, so I'm sure he'll be furious when he gets back from his trip. As I felt our relationship falling apart, I became depressed. Jessica slapped my back and said, "Hey, being a homemaker is a respectable job too. The money you've saved from being frugal is also yours. Plus, it's his fault. He said he'd transfer the necessary money, right? So let's have him pay even for the cost of living on your own." After being strongly persuaded by her, I took one last look around the house. I remembered how hard it was to rearrange things in the early days. Now I realized I had put my toner on the bathroom vanity without hesitation, and the shoe rack was filled with my shoes. I had always seen myself as a maid, but maybe I had actually become part of the family. Imprinting the image of the home I had lived in for 17 years in my mind, I nodded vigorously at her. Then, on the last day of the long weekend, I left the house I had shared with him. I was still staying at Jessica's place when he called. I picked up with a trembling hand. "Where are you?" he asked with a grumpy voice. Without answering his question, I said the words Jessica and I had decided on beforehand. "You said you were okay with a divorce, right? And that you would transfer the necessary money. I am divorcing you. Please provide for the cost of me living alone." "What? Stop talking nonsense and come back." He seemed to think this was just a runaway. I cut off his voice and spoke my final words. "Please have your new partner take care of your parents from now on. Thank you for 17 years. While he was still talking, I hung up. He called back several times, but I didn't pick up. I felt guilty about ending things unilaterally like this, but looking back, I had always accepted his one-sided demands ever since we got married. So I tried to think it was fine, at least in this last moment. The following year was a whirlwind. I negotiated with him through a lawyer, and finally got a divorce with alimony and living expenses assured. I had no peace of mind until I found a job, but I've been working as an office clerk at a local factory and slowly buying what I need with my monthly salary. "Nicole, can you make the deadline this month?" "Yeah, I'll make it, but I think I'm going to barely make it by the deadline. I don't have time to chat on the phone." All right, I'll go now. You have your piece this month too." 5 months ago, Jessica, who manages our local magazine, added a new section about saving money. As a frugal person, I've been given the chance to write a couple of pages there every month. I had given up my dream to work in a publishing company, so her arrangements mean a lot to me now. I'm a writer, and I have 17 years of experience in budgeting as a homemaker, which I want to share wholeheartedly. I was able to make a fresh start, but then an unexpected call came in. "It's good to hear your voice sounding well." "Mother-in-law?" My mother-in-law called me from her nursing home. I had said my goodbyes to her before my divorce, but I hadn't contacted her since then, so I was surprised she called. After talking about my father-in-law's advanced dementia, she updated me on my ex-husband's situation. "What? He broke up?" "Yes, that's the case. He's foolish, isn't he? He was dumped before the divorce was finalized." "I see. Seems like his relationship with that woman has already ended." "Well, that's expected, isn't it? Any young girl would run if she had to deal with taking care of seniors." "So who is at the home now?" "Brian. He ended up leaving his big corporate job, but he's trying with his complaints. He's such a fool. He was able to work because of his wife supporting him behind. He still doesn't talk about his own infidelity. Nicole, breaking up with him was the right thing to do." My ex-husband hasn't changed, but it seems like he's struggling a bit. I found myself a bit relieved by hearing that. My usually stern mother-in-law chuckled and said, "Nicole, thank you. I was planning to ask you to try again with him when I called, but your voice sounds so lively, so I decided not to ask." In the roughly 17 years we lived together, I never had such a long conversation with my mother-in-law. Our relationship wasn't bad, but it wasn't good either. I listened to her voice, assuming this would be the last time I'd hear from her, and I savored every word. "It turned out for the best," she said sadly, and my tears welled up. "It's been a year since my divorce. Everything has been going well, and I've managed to make a fresh start. However, I've always felt a lingering sense of regret. It's because I felt like I had wasted 17 years of my life. But then, with this phone call, my mother-in-law said thank you, and that she had planned to ask me to try again with her son. There's no chance of getting back together with my ex-husband, but hearing that from his mother made me genuinely happy. It felt like a validation of what I had done for those 17 years. I will never forget this phone call from her. Those 17 years were not wasted because now I believe that.